Hi guys, and welcome back to another video, Past Papers 101 with Miss Edwards. And today we'll be looking at the Integrated Science May-June Paper 2 for 2023. At the time of this recording, the exam was done a week ago, and if you're watching this video at a later date, that simply means you're preparing for your exam. So let's see what the 2023 paper was like. So let's get straight into this paper. Section A. First question. Using the formula energy consumption equals power in kilowatts times time in hours, calculate the energy used by a 100-watt fan if it runs for 24 hours daily. You must show all working. So for those who did the exam a week ago, the first thing you would have done is convert this 100 watt to kilowatts, and you convert watts to kilowatts by dividing by 1,000. So we have 100 watt there divided by 1,000, which would give us 0.1 kilowatts. And then multiply kilowatts by the number of hours. In this case, it is 24. So 0.1 times 24 equals 2.4 kilowatt hour. And that should give you your 3 marks. If you did something different on the paper, well, CSEC may look at your formula. So you don't have to fret if you didn't do exactly this, but this would have been the correct answer. The second question on the paper, or the second part of that question, Caribbean cuisine is an integral part of the culture of the region. Complete the table below by providing information on nutrients and their functions. So they left out the space in the table for nutrient, the function. So the first one was blank, and the function was growth and repair of cells. We know the nutrient for growth and repair would be protein. The next nutrient was carbohydrates. They asked for the function. It is used as the main source of energy. The next part of the table was blank for nutrient. The function they gave, used for insulation or as an energy store. We know that for insulation or emergency energy, we use fats and oils or lipids. And then the final nutrient they gave us in the table was vitamin. And if you're going to write the function for vitamins in general, it would be that it aids in normal body functions, fighting infections, and regulating hormones. This should be regulating hormones. So vitamins itself does not have a vitamin itself, as I said, does not have a specific function, because we know there are many different vitamins. So in general, vitamins aid in normal body functions, fighting infections, regulating hormones, and that's for 4 marks. The next part of the question asked, a construction worker who works long hours, has a 4-year-old daughter who spends long hours watching television and playing games on the computer. Explain how the diet of the construction worker should differ from that of his daughter based on their daily activities. Now you're looking at the fact that the construction worker would be doing a lot of manual labor, lifting, walking, carrying heavy things, and the daughter would be sitting all day. So we have to look at what foods they would need based on their activity or their daily tasks. So what I have as my answer, the construction worker needs more carbohydrates in his diet due to the nature of his job that requires heavy lifting of equipment. He also needs more protein than his daughter because his tissues and cells would get worn out from his job. His daughter does not need large amounts of these foods because she's less active than her father. The proportions of food for the father would also be too large for the daughter due to the energy requirements and age. So you're talking about the fact that the father would need more carbohydrates, energy giving foods for his daily tasks. The daughter would not, because she doesn't really do much. She only sits and watch television and play games on the computer. And you also talk about the fact that their age difference would also show us how much food they would be eating. You know, a larger or an older person or a hardworking person would need way more food than a 4-year-old child. That would be for 2 marks. The next part of the question asks, suggest 2 changes that the daughter in B above could make to have a healthier lifestyle. Give 1 reason for your suggestion. Remember, when you see the word suggest, it doesn't have to be a fact from a textbook, but this could be a suggestion from your own, thinking, your own chain of thought. So I have for 1 here that she could incorporate playing sports as a form of exercise. And you know me, I'm gonna give you more answers if they are possible, right? So if you don't have that, she could play sport. You could say that she becomes more sociable by having play dates with friends. And the reason being, because they ask you for 2 and they ask you for the reason being is that she needs to become physically active to avoid weight gain, and also to become more sociable to improve her mental health and relieve stress. Remember, health is not just about being physically well, but it's also about being physically, mentally, and socially well. So you want to incorporate the fact that she is so secluded from persons that she could try and becoming more social or sociable. And that would have been for 4 marks. The next part of the question, the government across the Caribbean are concerned about incidents of overweight and obese citizens. Table 1 below shows the annual statistics for obese adult females in a Caribbean territory. Table 1, the percentage of obese adult females in a Caribbean territory for 2007 to 2017. So this is our table, shows us the years and the amount or the percentage of adult obese females or obese adult females. The first part of the question, they ask you to define the term obese. This would be the condition which occurs when a person eats more food than the amount required for their lifestyle that leads to excess fat being stored in the body. Now, if you don't have if you didn't have an exact definition like this, or if this wouldn't be the exact wording you think you would put, that's fine. It's only for 1 mark, but it should be at the end of the day that there is excess weight or body fat being stored. So that would be for 1 mark. The next part of the question says, on the grid provided on page 7, plot a graph to represent the data in table 1. Draw a line of best fit through the points. That's for 8 marks. It also says, using the graph, we're going to determine some data. So let's look at how we plot the graph first of all. Now the table shows us the year and also shows us the percentage. Pretty straightforward numbers. So let's look at the graph. Let's look at what they asked us to do and what they gave us. Now this was an easy graph because they already put in the years for you. They already showed you where percentage would be. So there is no harm in this, or it wasn't hard at all. All you need to do now is just look at your points and do your match or your intersects to see where your points would fall. So year 2007, there was 25% adult obese adult females. So let's look where we have 2007, we find 25%. We just bring up our line, or we use our finger to trace where both numbers would intersect, and we put our point, and that's our first point, and that's what we do for the rest of the points. Now it also says we should draw a line of best fit. Now for this graph, based on how the points were plotted, the line of best fit, if it had passed through the origin or started at 0, it would have probably only gone through 1 point. If you drew yours like that, I don't think CSEC would be too harsh on you. But what we usually do is look for the path where we would draw our line of best fit that would take into consideration as many points as possible, or the points that would line up along a straight. So when we draw our line of best fit, it would pass through most of the points, right? So my line of best fit here would have had an origin of 10, or would have had a beginning of 10 right here, and when I drew it, I kind of got it through these 3 points. Now if you didn't do yours like this, it shouldn't be incorrect, but this would have given you a better line of best fit. The next part of the question asks us to use the graph plotted in C2 on page 7 to determine the percentage of obese adult females in 2014. So remember, when they ask you for this piece of information, because they always ask you to use your graph to determine something, just use the piece of information they give you in the question to help you. So they asked about 2014 right here. So looking across, when we find the year, we go up, we see where it touches our line of best fit, and then we bring it across to see where it would intersect with the percentage. And right here I have it, mine isn't as straight, but I have mine being about 31%. The other part of the question also asks us to determine the percentage of the adult obese females at the year 2019. So we do the same thing. You draw a dotted line from your year, we go up, we see where it touches our line of best fit, we bring it across, and for this one it looked at about 44%. Now it all depends on how you would have drawn your line of best fit. So based on how you would have drawn yours, you know, you would be able to determine exactly those points, but that would be the way to go about answering those 2 questions. So I have 31% and 44%, and those would be for 1 mark a piece, and that's 25 marks for your first question. They didn't ask us to, but guys, remember, whenever you get a graph, always put a title just to be safe. So graph showing the percentage of obese adult females in a Caribbean territory for the period 2007 to 2017. All right. Question 2. We jump into some chemistry. Define the term neutralization. Now, neutralization is the reaction between an acid and a base that produces a salt and water, and that is 1 mark. The second part of the question says to state the pH ranges for each of the following. So acids and bases, the pH range for acids would be from 0 to 6. And for bases, it would be from 8 to 14. Remember, you cannot include 7 in acids or bases because 7 is neutral. Acids would be from 0 to 6, then bases begin at 8 to 14 and continue to 14, but 7 is the point of neutral pH. So those would be your correct answers. So it says classify each of the following as either an acid or a base. The first one, bleach, would be a base. The second one, toothpaste, would be a base, and vinegar, an acid. 3 marks. It said give 1 example of a household item that is considered neutral. Now if you put water, you would have gotten your 1 mark. It's the most common neutral pH, or the substance which has a pH of 7, and table salt could also be used, or even cooking oil. So any one of those you would have gotten 1 mark. If you have any other that you can find on Google that would have a neutral pH, then if you knew you put that as your answer, then that could have given you your 1 mark. 5. Typically, there is a build-up of a white substance in a kettle. Explain how the properties of vinegar make it suitable for cleaning the build-up of the white substance usually seen in kettles. Now, acids are chemicals that are corrosive, meaning they can strip away or destroy other materials. The build-up of white in kettles is called lime scale, and it is due to insoluble calcium carbonate, which is a base, found in hard water. Now, when an acid such as vinegar is used, it reacts with the calcium carbonate that produces a salt and water, which makes them soluble so they can be washed away. So the properties of vinegar which make it suitable for cleaning up this white substance is: 1, it's corrosive, so you know it's gonna strip away. 2, it's an acid, and that insoluble thing is a base, and we know when acids and base combine we get a salt and a water, and this salt is usually soluble so it can be washed away. So those are the properties of vinegar which make them suitable for cleaning up. If you explain something like this, well, you talk about how the acid would, I guess CXC would find marks to give you. So as long as you attempted the question and your answer was somewhere along these lines, you should have gotten some marks from this response or from your response. Part B of the question states, a person concludes that the water in his apartment complex is hard water because when washing clothes, the detergent does not lather very well, even when using a soapy detergent. Explain one reason why this assumption is accurate. Now, the assumption is accurate because the water from his apartment complex is more than likely being pumped from a water station that sources its water from a spring. So this water may contain dissolved minerals from running over rocks, which makes the water hard. Hard water does not form lather with soap easily, and that is why his assumption is correct. So if you mentioned in your answer that the water was hard because it contains some kind of dissolved minerals, and because of the fact that it doesn't lather very well when the soap is being used or when the detergent is being used, then that would be the correct answer. And this was for 3 marks. Question or part 2 to the question: suggest 2 things that can be done to correct the problem being experienced with the water in the above. So 1, you could heat the water before use. This will make the soluble minerals insoluble so that they can be removed from the water. 2, you could add washing soda to the water before using, or even add some white vinegar to the water so that it can become softened. So adding washing soda or vinegar, or even boiling the water or heating the water, could have been a correct response, and any 2 of those would have given you 2 marks. The next question, question 3, this is a bit of biology. 2 stages in the breathing process of humans are shown in figure 1 below. So we have process A, we have process B, we see a glass tube, we see a bell jar, balloons, and rubber sheet, and this diagram should be familiar to most persons, and even if you don't remember exactly which structure it is or where you saw it from, it should ring a bell. Something should come back to mind based on this diagram. So let's see what question they're asking us about in the bottom half of the page, and the figure is entitled Bell Jars Representing the Breathing Process in Humans. So 1, identify the parts of the respiratory system that are represented by the balloons and the rubber sheet in figure 1. Now, if you said the balloons were lungs, correct, and if you said the rubber sheet was the diaphragm, you are correct. Part 2 says identify the processes in breathing that are most likely represented as process A and process B. If you had process A being inhaling or inhalation, correct, or inhale. Process B would be exhaling, exhalation, expiration, any one of those terms, then you would have gotten your 2 marks. It says suggest one similarity between the bell jar and the actual chest cavity of humans. Now, if you said they both have a similar dome shape, that could be used and that could be correct. Or if you could say it is enclosed and air can only enter through the trachea, then that is fine as well. So any one of those and you could have gotten your 1 mark. And I believe this question was fairly simple, so 5 marks. I believe you got all 5 marks. Now, part B of the question, it says the following equation is the chemical equation of a vital process that occurs in most living organisms. Now, we have a chemical formula there, or a chemical equation. So we have C6H12O6 plus O2 arrow 6CO2 plus 6H2O plus ATP. Now it says state the name of each compound shown in the chemical equation. C6H12O6 would be glucose. O2 would be oxygen. 6CO2 would be carbon dioxide. And 6H2O would be water. That's 4 marks. The next part of the question says, name the process represented in the equation above. The answer would be aerobic respiration. Now, if you did not remember, or if you don't know, if you put aerobic there and you just put respiration, you may get the mark. I'm not sure what CXC will do, but aerobic respiration would be the specific process happening there. Part 3 of the question, a stay-at-home parent of a 2-year-old smokes a pack of cigarettes a day. Name 2 health conditions that children exposed to second-hand smoke may develop. Now, if you said asthma, respiratory tract infection, bronchitis, pneumonia, or even SIDS, which is sudden infant death syndrome, that one was from textbook, then you should have gotten your 2 marks. So any 2 of those, or even if you thought of any other respiratory illnesses, you should have gotten, or you should get your 2 marks. Next part of the question says, suggest 3 things that can be done to reduce the amount of secondhand smoke to which a child is exposed. Now, if you said 1 person should not be allowed to smoke around children, 2 children should wear masks if they have to be around smokers, 3 smoking in public places should be banned. Those would be 3 good suggestions. Remember, the word suggest means that it can come from your own line of thought or your own thinking. It is not necessarily from a textbook. So suggest, if you know that you suggested something that would have prevented children from coming in contact with smoke from cigarettes, then you are fine. So that would be for 3 marks. Next question. The Caribbean region is taking a greater interest in the numerous environmental issues which have occurred as a result of the use of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are classified as non-renewable fuels. Define the term non-renewable. Now, non-renewable fuel is any resource that cannot be replenished in a lifetime. Right? So if you said that it cannot be replenished, it is finite, meaning that it will run out, then you should get your 1 mark. Part 2 of the question says, list 3 types of fossil fuels. Now, if you know fossil fuels, you will know that the examples are coal, crude oil, gasoline, natural gas, petroleum. Any one of those fuels would be correct. So coal, crude oil, gasoline, natural gas, and petroleum. Part 3 of the question, explain how the burning of fossil fuels is contributing to the increasing temperatures being experienced on Earth. Now, if you're burning something, that means some heat must be generated and also some harmful gases. So burning fossil fuels releases gases such as carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gases help to trap heat from the sun in the atmosphere to keep the earth warm for life to exist. But too much carbon dioxide causes too much heat to be trapped, which contributes to global warming. This contributes to climate change and causes an increase in natural disasters. So the fact that when you burn fossil fuels, you get carbon dioxide, which traps heat, is negative. If we release too much, then we're going to be trapping more heat than we need, and ultimately we will cause that increase in temperature all over the earth. If you mentioned anything along these lines in the exam, guys, then you would have gotten some marks. Remember, my answers are detailed. I know some persons don't go as deep during the exam, even though that is what is required. So CSEC has that breakdown of how they will give you the marks based on what you put forward. So if you mention anything along these lines, there are some marks available for you. Next part of the question, it says identify the term that is used to describe the increase in atmospheric temperatures being experienced on Earth. If you said global warming, you are correct, and that's 1 mark. Part 2, recommend one solution for controlling the increasing surface temperatures of the Earth. Now, I have an answer that you see they're going to be asking you to use your answer in the next part of the question. So my answer is using alternative sources of energy instead of fossil fuels. So an alternative source of energy would be like solar, wind, hydroelectricity, anything other than fossil fuels for energy would be an alternative source. Now part 3 of the question says discuss whether the recommendation in B2 above is suitable for use in the Caribbean region. So the answer you gave before, you're now going to have to incorporate it in this response to see how it would be suitable for the Caribbean region. Now, because I said alternative source of energy and I gave an example, solar or wind, we know the Caribbean islands are rich in sunlight. So we always have sunlight for most of the year. So an alternative source of energy, I said, are those that can be found in nature and those that are renewable. An example that can be used in the Caribbean is solar energy instead of fossil fuels to generate electricity. This is suitable because the Caribbean has consistent sunshine and solar panels are small enough and reliable enough to power buildings, and it is also less expensive than fossil fuels. So if you mentioned some kind of alternative source of energy, maybe you didn't mention solar and wind come to mind, all you have to do is just state how Caribbean countries, are always abundant in a lot of wind and breeze, and we have a lot of mountains, so we know we can build turbines up high to harvest that wind energy. If you spoke about hydroelectricity, you talk about the fact that we have some large rivers, the power from those running streams and waterfalls can help to turn turbines, because in the Caribbean we do have large water bodies in some islands, not all but some. So if you mention anything along those lines, guys, you should have gotten your 3 marks. Part 4 of the question, explain why Caribbean islands should be concerned about the increase in atmospheric temperatures being experienced on Earth. So 1, global warming causes ice caps to melt, and Caribbean islands are surrounded by water. If these ice caps melt, then that would cause sea levels to rise, making Caribbean islands more prone to coastal erosion and flooding. So that's one way. I give you another way. They also cause increase in the frequency and intensity of hurricanes and natural disasters which occur in the Caribbean region. We know this, right? And 3, I gave you another one. Rising temperature of seas can lead to species death, which harm livelihoods for farmers, and loss of habitats such as coral reefs for aquatic creatures. And when I said farmers, I I meant to say fishermen, but thinking back to farmers may be affected because of the rising temperature. You know, plants will not grow as well as they should if we have too much rainfall, if we have too little rainfall, which are also negative effects from climate change and global warming. So if you mention anything like this, if you mention how climate change can harm the environment, anything at all, then you should get your marks. And this one was for 3 marks. So anyone you explain, any point, should have gotten your 3 marks. Section B. Figure 2 shows a diagram of the human skeleton. How many of you remember seeing this question if you did the exam? Or if you haven't done the exam, this question, it asks us for part A and part B and a function of part A and part B. Now everybody should be thinking A is skull and B is the spine. Now if you didn't say spine, or if you said backbone, you'd have still gotten the mark, or you'd still get the mark. A is the skull, the function, it protects the brain and gives the face structure. And B, the spine or the backbone, protects the spinal cord and also supports the upper body. Part 2 of the question says, state one function of the long bones in humans. And long bones produce blood cells. So that would be your 1 mark for that part of the question. Part B, explain how skeletal muscles in the arm work together to allow humans to flex their arm. You must include the names of the muscles in your answer. So flexing the arm, they're talking about, you know, when those bodybuilders flex, they show the muscle. So how does the skeletal muscle work to flex the arm? So flexing the arm, and it also says you must include the names of the muscles. So 2 muscles must come to your mind, the biceps and the triceps. Flexing the arm is a result of the antagonistic muscles known as the biceps and the triceps muscles. When the arm is bent, the biceps muscles at the end of the elbow contracts and the triceps muscles relax. When the arm is straightened, the biceps muscle relaxes and the triceps contracts. The bending and the straightening of the arm results in the flexing motion. That's 5 marks. Now there's no going around it. Your answer should have looked something like this. You must mention biceps, triceps. You must mention how they contract and relax to get your 5 marks. Next part of the question, it says figure 3 shows a diagram of the human arm holding a dumbbell. And the question says, explain how the arm acts like a lever to pick up the weight. So a lever has 3 points, the fulcrum, the effort, and the load, right? And so you must mention how the arm is similar to that or has those 3 points. So in a forearm, the fulcrum is at the elbow joint. The effort to lift the dumbbell comes from the biceps muscle at the front of the forearm, and the load is at the end of the arm, or in this case, the dumbbell. And the forearm is a 3rd class lever. And we know that once the effort is going to be put in, the arm is going to be raised with the load, and the fulcrum there would help to keep that part together, the effort and the load together right there at the elbow. So if you mention something similar to this, then you should have gotten your 5 marks. Question 6, and this is the final question on the paper. Explain the differences between an object which demonstrates stable equilibrium and one which demonstrates unstable equilibrium. Your response must include an example of each type of equilibrium. Now, stable equilibrium refers to the state an object is in when a force is applied that will cause the object to be displaced but will return to its original position and still have its center of gravity within its base. And the base is usually wide. An example of stable equilibrium would be a ball in a bowl, and when the ball is moved up the sides of the bowl, it will always return to the center of the bowl. Unstable equilibrium refers to the state an object is in when a force is applied that will cause the object to be displaced and will move away from its original position. The center of gravity moves outside of its base, and the base is usually narrow or small, and the object cannot be balanced on its own. An example of unstable equilibrium would be a ball placed on an upside down bowl. When moved, it will roll away and will not return to its original position. So if you know that you're not so good with the physics part, the equilibrium, go to your textbook, make sure you get this packed down. Another example would have been the one with the cone. You know, the cone down on the wide part would be stable, would be in stable equilibrium, and on the pointed part, or I think the apex, the point right there, it would be in unstable equilibrium. So that's 4 marks. For you to get all 4 marks, you must explain something similar. My definitions may have been a little wordy or in depth, but if you said anything along those lines and you gave a solid example, you should have gotten your 4 marks. Part B of the question: thermostats require the use of bimetallic strips to regulate temperature. Identify 2 combinations of metals other than brass and iron which can be used in a bimetallic strip. So examples I have that you can use instead are alloy of steel and nickel. This is Invar. This one isn't really used so much anymore, but it was in your textbook, so I took that as an example. So in case you were studying your textbook, you saw it, you put it back on the paper, it's valid. You could have said steel and copper, or even steel and brass, and you get your 2 marks. Question 2, identify, or part 2 of that part of the question, identify one device other than a thermostat that uses bimetallic strips. You could have said an electric clothes iron, electric oven, a refrigerator. All of those use bimetallic strips. This part of the question, part 3, figure 4 below shows a bimetallic strip made of brass and iron in different conditions. You have figure 1, 2, and 3, and it's the diagram of the bimetallic strip. It says identify the strips 1, 2, and 3 that represent the thermostat at cold temperatures, hot temperatures, and room temperatures. If you said cold temperatures was 3, hot temperatures diagram 2, and room temperature was diagram 1, you're correct. When bimetallic strips are heated, they bend downwards. When it is cooled, it will bend upwards, and when it is at room temp, it will lay flat. 3 marks. Part 4 of the question, explain how the bimetallic strip in thermostats is used to control the temperature. Now the bimetallic strip consists of 2 different metals which are welded together, and they expand at different rates as they're heated. So one is going to be expanding at a slower rate than the other. The different expansions will force the flat strip to bend one way if heated and in the opposite direction if cooled below its initial temperature. When flat, the bimetallic strip becomes a part of the circuit. When the appliance gets heated to a specific temperature, the strip will bend away from the circuit. This breaks the electricity being conducted. As the appliance cools, the strip becomes flat and completes the circuit again. This helps to maintain the temperature with which the appliance can produce or withstand. And that was for 5 marks. And that's the end of the test. How did you think you did, based on the fact that if you did the exam a week ago, this would have been your answer sheet? If you know that you didn't do so well on the paper 2, don't fret. Remember, you still have your paper 1. All the best in the rest of your examinations, guys, and hopefully you keep studying. Share this video, like this video, and subscribe. Remember, with God, all results can be distinctions.